He was on his knees in the middle of the grand marble hallway. The polished floor reflected the tears in his eyes. His trembling voice echoed against the high ceiling. I had never seen a man so powerful look so broken. In that moment, Andrew Stanford, the famous billionaire, who was known for his cold gaze and sharp mind, was no longer a titan of business. He was desperate, pleading in a voice I had never heard from him before. He looked up at me with raw pain carved into every line of his face. His expensive suit was rumpled, as though he had worn it for days without rest. The hallway felt cold, even though the heated floors were set to a perfect temperature. Outside, the rain poured down the large windows, and inside, my heart pounded so loud I was sure he could hear it. "Please," Andrew said, voice cracking, "give me a baby. I'll give you everything, even my entire fortune." I froze. My breath caught in my throat. No part of me had expected him to say those words. We had known each other for a while. We were not close, but he paid attention to me in a way he didn't pay attention to others. He would nod and greet me, ask polite questions about my day. But how did we end up here, him on the floor, eyes brimming with tears, begging? My mind raced. I recalled the rumors of his heartbreak. People said he was almost 50 and had lived alone for so long. Some whispered about his attempts at fatherhood that failed every time. Others said that behind every closed door, he was known to cry late into the night, consumed by an emptiness that even billions of dollars could not fix. Now he was offering me his entire fortune, just to have a child. The enormity of it weighed heavily on me. I could barely breathe, let alone think of what to say. 1,000 questions whirled in my mind. Why me? What made him believe I was capable of giving him a child? I reached out to help him from the floor, but he refused to stand. He clasped my hand tight. Tears dropped from his eyes onto my fingertips. "I have tried everything," he whispered. "I've seen the best doctors. I have asked the best specialists. They tell me the same thing. It might be too late. The success rate is so low. But I can't give up. I need an heir. I need to leave my fortune, my legacy, to someone who's a part of me." I stayed silent. A wave of pity and shock washed over me. The lonely truth was right there in his voice. He had been abandoned by hope. "Our deal can be anything you want," he said. "I'm not trying to trap you. If you give me a baby, I will care for you both forever. You'll never have to worry about money. If you want, I'll leave everything in the child's name. But please, give Megavuce a chance." He stared at me, words echoing through the silent hallway. My pulse thundered in my ears. I wanted to run, but I also wanted to comfort him. I could not think clearly. I knew the entire world outside these walls might judge me. Maybe they would say I married him for money. Maybe they would accuse me of using him. Or maybe they would call me crazy for entertaining such a plan when we were not even in a serious relationship. We were not even dating properly. He was my boss, my friend, and acquaintance all in one, but never did we talk about love. At the same time, I saw something behind his tears. I could not ignore hope. A small hope that I could give him what he had longed for all these years. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry. Finally, I managed to whisper the only word I could find in my stunned state. "Why?" Andrew's eyes flickered with misery. Slowly, he got up from the floor, but my hand stayed in his. We stood there in that wide hallway, with the lights glowing down on us like spotlights in a theater. I expected him to let go, but his grip tightened, as though he drew all courage from my presence. Without waiting for my question again, he guided me down the hall toward his study. The walls were lined with paintings worth millions. I was used to seeing them, yet that night they seemed darker, as if the shadows flickered with each step we took. He opened the heavy doors and led me inside. This room was his private retreat. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with old volumes gave the space a wise, somewhat gloomy feel. A large portrait of a woman hung above the fireplace. She had mesmerizing eyes, similar to Andrew's, but fiercer. I had often noticed how Andrew would glance at that painting, lost in thought. Once inside, Andrew hesitated near the portrait. He released my hand, then gently touched the edge of the frame. "This was my grandmother," he said quietly. "She was strong. She built the foundation of my family's business before I was born. Without her, I wouldn't be where I am now." He stared at the portrait and sighed. "She taught me about ambition. She taught me never to give up on what truly matters." I said nothing. Instead, I walked closer. The woman in the painting had a slight smile, one brow raised in a way that seemed both warm and strict. Andrew turned to me. "I was the last child in my family line. My grandmother hoped I would someday have a child to carry on what she built. As crazy as it sounds, I owe it to her. I've tried everything to make it happen, but life kept placing barriers." He cleared his throat. "I'm no longer a young man. I spent my prime years building a business empire. I lost myself so many times, and each time I tried to start a family, I faced devastation. One by one, women left me. Some wanted my money but didn't want to raise a child. Others wanted a child but had hidden motives. And some truly loved me but, in the end, left because they could see how trapped I was by the pressure to continue the family line. Each relationship ended in heartbreak. A heavy silence filled the study. Andrew turned from the portrait and faced me again. His eyes were rimmed with red, and the pain in them was unmistakable. "Then, I met you, Amelia." He paused, inhaling deeply. "You were so patient. You never asked for more than a fair wage for your work, even when I offered raises and promotions. You wanted to build your life on your own. You carry yourself with a quiet strength. You do not try to impress people with fancy clothes or words. You are honest, and I wanted you in my life. I just didn't know how to tell you that. Then, when the doctors told me for the 10th time that my chances of fatherhood were slim, I grew desperate. I realized I might never have a child unless." I felt my heart pounding again. The weight of his confession sank into my chest. All these months I worked for him. I had never realized how much he noticed me, how much he paid attention to my personality. "But why me?" I asked again, my voice trembling. I was unsure if I could handle the responsibility of being the mother of his child, especially if it meant so much to him. Andrew gave a weak smile. "Because I know you would love the child for who they are, and not for the inheritance. Because in the quiet moments, I see how you talk to others. You value people. You do not chase the spotlight. And you do not love wealth. You would raise a kind child who would do good for the world. And if the miracle happened, if we somehow succeed, me grandmother's wish, my own wish, would finally be fulfilled." Tears sprang to my eyes, though I tried to blink them away. His words touched a hidden place in my heart. I had grown up with very little. I understood loneliness. I understood the longing for a family, though I had not dared to plan for it yet. But was I ready for this? In the days that followed, I could barely sleep. Andrew said he would wait for my answer. He was patient in his own determined way. Every morning at breakfast, he would greet me kindly. During the day, he would let me do my tasks without pressing me. But each evening, before bed, we would walk through the gardens. He would gently remind me that I could have everything I ever wanted, if I just agreed. I did not know a single soul who wouldn't be tempted by his offer. He owned a private jet, a fleet of luxury cars, and mansions around the world. He had more money than entire countries. Yet he was alone. That thought broke my heart. It also made me reconsider my own life. Did I want children? Was I ready to become a mother? And was our relationship as simple as employer and employee? The lights in my guest suite glowed softly each night as I paced around, thinking. I recalled my difficult childhood, how I had lost both parents at a young age, how I had dreamed of a stable, loving home. how I promised myself that if I ever had a baby, I would do anything to protect it and give it love. My phone rang often, with my sister telling me about her family. She would talk about how wonderful it felt to read bedtime stories to her kids, and how her small house was always filled with laughter. I had always listened with genuine happiness, though a small pang in my chest told me I might be missing something. Now, that life might be within reach, but it came with Andrew's heartbreak and the pressure of carrying his heir. It was a choice that would change my life forever. One night, I could not handle the silence anymore. I left my suite and wandered into the house's music room. Andrew had told me I was free to go anywhere I liked. The music room was a place I loved because it had a grand piano. My mother used to play the piano to calm her mind. Now, I did the same. I sat at the polished bench, letting my fingers move lightly over the keys. A slow melody, something my mother once taught me, filled the room. The music wove through me, reminding me of a simpler time when I was a child. I saw the reflection of tears on the piano's surface. I wasn't sure how long I played, but eventually, I noticed Andrew standing at the doorway. He said nothing, just listened. There was a sadness in his eyes, but also a gentle warmth. When I finished the song, he walked over and sat beside me on the bench. "Do you want to talk?" he asked softly. I nodded. "I want a family. I always have. But to jump straight to motherhood, with you." He reached for my hand. "I understand. This is a lot to ask. If it helps at all, I promise I won't rush you. We can do it step by step. I want you to marry me not just to have a child, but to be by my side as my wife. If you don't want to be with me, I'll accept that. But if you do, we can try to have the baby in a way that feels right. Doctors, treatments, maybe adoption if it doesn't work out. Any path you choose, I will honor it." I studied his face. I saw the longing in his eyes, but also a sincerity that rose from deep within. He was not forcing me to do anything. He was asking. "Andrew," I whispered, "I need time. I do care about you, and I know it's been lonely for you. But let me think about the marriage part. Let me think about the baby part. Everything is happening so fast." He squeezed my hand gently and nodded. "Take all the time you need," he said. "I'll wait." Over the next month, Andrew and I spent our days getting to know each other in ways we never did before. We shared stories about our childhoods. We laughed about silly moments. He learned I loved gardening and started spending time in the greenhouse with me, even though he normally avoided manual labor. I learned he wrote poetry when he was younger, though he hid it under his mattress to hide from his father's ridicule. We built an odd but tender friendship. He no longer brought up the proposal every day, but the question hung in the air. Late at night, I would imagine a future with him. A child running through the enormous corridors, laughter echoing off the marble walls. Andrew holding a little hand, a smile on his face that finally erased the sadness in his eyes. Yet, I worried. Was I enough for him? Would marrying him mean I lost my own identity? Could I truly make him happy if we discovered we couldn't have a child after all? These questions tugged at me. One evening after a quiet dinner, Andrew and I were sitting on the terrace overlooking the estate's vast gardens. The sun was setting, painting the sky in pink and orange. My heart felt heavy with the decision I had to make. I turned to him, watched his profile as he gazed at the horizon. I realized how much I admired his strength and softness mixed together. Despite the fear inside me, I timidly placed my hand on top of his. He startled slightly, then looked at me with gentle curiosity. "I will try," I said. "I will try to be with you, to see if we can have a baby. But I can't promise results, and I'm afraid of failing and letting you down." Andrew pulled me into a hug. I felt his chest rise and fall under my cheek. "Thank you," he said. "We will face this together." We decided to wed in a small ceremony. mostly because Andrew wanted to honor the tradition. Newspapers and tabloids went wild with gossip. Headlines screamed about the girl who snatched the billionaire's heart, or Andrew Stanford's sudden wedding to unknown woman. We tried to shut out the noise. Our wedding was held in a private chapel on the estate grounds. I wore a simple white gown, while Andrew stood in a classic black tuxedo. Only a few close employees and some distant relatives attended. The vows were solemn and personal. I clutched Andrew's hands, my heart full of anxiety and wonder. I, Andrew, take you, Amelia, to be my lawfully wedded wife, he said, voice trembling with emotion. To have and to hold, through fortune and adversity, as my partner for life. I will love, honor, and cherish you. I promise to never give up, no matter the storms we face. Tears stung my eyes. My voice quivered as I repeated similar vows. I looked into his eyes, which shone with gratitude. For a moment, I forgot the world outside. I forgot the rumors. I forgot the pressure. And in that moment, I felt a surge of hope fill my heart. When we were pronounced husband and wife, Andrew kissed me gently. Applause broke out across the small group. We walked down the aisle, hand in hand. For better or worse, we had taken a big step together. But happiness and struggle tend to stay side by side. The next day, articles flooded the internet about me. Rumors flew around that I was a gold digger, that I trapped Andrew into marriage, that I forced him to sign his fortune over. I tried hard not to read them, but the harsh words cut me deeply. Andrew grew furious. To protect me, he had his lawyers send out statements denying the lies. But once gossip spread, it was hard to push back. We tried to ignore it and focused on the next step, trying to have a baby. Doctors and fertility specialists became a regular part of our daily life. We visited the best clinics in Europe, Asia, and America. Each time, Andrew waited anxiously in waiting rooms while tests were run. Then he would hold my hand when it was his turn to have exams. After a few weeks, the results came in. There were problems with his biology, his age, his stress levels, years of possibly ignoring health for the sake of business. The doctors were not optimistic. They suggested advanced treatments, maybe IVF with a donor if needed. But Andrew shook his head, refusing to consider a donor. He wanted his own biological child. We began the procedures recommended by the doctor. I took hormones, visited the clinic regularly, and followed strict schedules. Andrew, in turn, tried to reduce his workload, adjusting his diet and sleeping more. The staff tiptoed around us, trying to be supportive. Despite everything, the first round of treatment failed. The doctor called to say no viable embryo had formed. Andrew closed himself in his study for hours that night. I found him much later, sitting on the floor, staring at the portrait of his grandmother again. She would be disappointed, he said, voice hollow. No, she wouldn't, I said, kneeling next to him. She would want you to be happy. She wouldn't want you to torture yourself like this. Andrew looked at me with haunted eyes. But I'm letting you down too. We married with the hope of having a child. I can't even give you that. My own sorrow found its way out in a tear that slid down my cheek. Listen to me, I chose this. I knew it might not be easy. It's not anyone's fault. He did not answer. He simply wrapped his arms around me. We stayed there for a long time, sharing silence and a quiet heartbreak. We did not give up. Our second round of treatment came a few months later. The clinic recommended a different plan. This time, they wanted Andrew to try new medication. We were told that success rates were small but still possible. We camped out in a luxury apartment near the clinic. Andrew tried to keep his mind off business, but calls from his board members came in constantly. He managed to keep those calls short, determined to invest all his energy into this process. The routine was exhausting: blood tests, hormone shots, daily checkups on Andrew's health. We had to be patient and hopeful. Every night, Andrew massaged my shoulders, telling me we would get through this. But I saw the strain behind his words. He wanted to protect me from disappointment, even though he was struggling too. During a late-night phone call, my sister offered some comfort. "Kids are miracles," she said. "Sometimes they come when you least expect them. Don't let stress steal your joy." I tried to cling to that advice. I tried to keep Andrew's spirits up. We watched comedies on TV, we cooked simple meals together, and we held hands in bed, whispering about a child who might come into our lives. Then the test results arrived for the second round, negative again. Andrew broke down that night. He smashed a vase in the apartment's living room, something so out of character for him. Then he turned to me with tears burning in his eyes. "I can't do this anymore," he said bitterly. "My entire life, I've worked so hard. I have more money than I could ever spend. But I can't achieve this one thing, this one dream. Why did I think it would work?" He stormed out of the apartment before I could stop him. I did not know where he was going, and he did not answer my calls for hours. I sat on the couch, trembling, wondering if he would return. I prayed, hoping he was safe. Eventually, just before dawn, I heard him at the door. He stumbled in, wearing a drenched coat and smelling like the cold night air. "I just walked," he muttered. "I couldn't breathe." Without a word, I wrapped him in a hug, and he clung to me like a lifeline. Then we silently made our way to bed and held each other until morning. We took a short break from treatments after that. The doctor suggested a few months of rest. Andrew returned to his business affairs, but with less vigor. He even considered retiring early. He also began therapy sessions to handle the stress and sense of failure he felt. I joined him for a few sessions. We spoke openly about the shame, the guilt, and the sadness that accompanied infertility. At the advice of the fertility doctor, we started exploring adoption. Andrew was not sure. He wanted a biological child, but the pain of repeated attempts was wearing him down. Eventually, after a few talks, he said, "If we can't have a baby ourselves, maybe adoption is the path. Perhaps love is more important than blood." My heart soared at his words. The thought of giving a child in need a safe home filled me with hope. We even met with an adoption counselor. We started filling out forms to see if we could start the process. We began reading about children from different places who needed parents. But just as we dipped our toes into the adoption world, the fertility doctor called again. He proposed one more method, a special procedure that had shown promise for older couples. We had to decide between continuing with adoption or trying this final medical approach. Andrew and I talked for hours. He was torn. He wanted to see the adoption through, but the doctor's words sparked a tiny flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, his grandmother's wish and his own desire for a biological child could come true. In the end, we decided to try. "This will be our last attempt," Andrew said, bracing himself. "If it fails, we will move on with adoption. Either way, we will have a child. I promise you that." The months that followed were a blur of medical procedures, emotional highs, and lows. Andrew and I held on to each other and tried not to get lost in the storm. My sister visited to help me through the painful daily injections. Andrew stayed strong, determined not to flee under frustration. We combined everything: special diets, therapy, moderate exercise, even acupuncture as recommended by a holistic practitioner. Andrew resigned from several boards, stepping down from external responsibilities. He decided the stress was too high. He wanted his entire focus to be on this final chance. I remember the day we finally went in for the embryo transfer. The clinic felt cold and quiet. Even the pastel-colored walls resonated with tension. Andrew held my hand the entire time. When it was done, the doctor told us to go home and rest. We had to wait for the results. Those 2 weeks of waiting were the longest of my life. Each day, I woke up and prayed, or sometimes I just stared at the ceiling, too afraid to hope. Andrew tried to keep busy reading. Sometimes he would start pacing from room to room. He canceled all business calls, leaving instructions to his staff that we were not to be disturbed. Then, on the morning of the scheduled test, my hands shook as I prepared to go to the clinic. Andrew was pale, his jaw set. He kept glancing at me with anxiety. We arrived at the clinic, gave the necessary samples, and were told the results would be ready in a few hours. We decided to wait at a nearby cafe instead of going home. Every tick of the clock was a drumbeat in my mind. Andrew sipped a cup of tea, though he never tasted it. I tried reading a magazine, but the words swam on the page. Finally, my phone rang. It was the doctor's office. My heart nearly stopped as I answered. Andrew grabbed my free hand, holding it so tight that it hurt. "Congratulations," the nurse said on the other end. "The result is positive." Tears sprang from my eyes. My mouth fell open, and for a moment, I couldn't speak. I heard Andrew's breathing become ragged, and I realized tears were streaming down his face, too. I forced myself to stay steady enough to listen to the nurse's instructions. We were early in the pregnancy, and we had to be careful. Regular checkups were crucial, but it was real. A tiny life had started inside me. Andrew drew me into a trembling hug right there in the middle of the cafe. People glanced at us, some with curiosity, some with knowing smiles. We didn't care. In that moment, we felt the first rush of joy in our marriage. The hope that had once felt like a wisp of smoke was now a shimmering light, growing stronger with each breath we took. The next few weeks were filled with caution. I was told to rest more. Andrew hired a private nurse and even installed special equipment in the house to ensure I was comfortable. He tiptoed around me like I was made of glass. Sometimes, I worried that something might go wrong. Andrew worried too, though he tried to hide it. One morning, I found him pacing in the bedroom, beads of sweat on his forehead. When I touched his arm, he nearly jumped. "Everything is going to be all right," I said gently. "We just need to stay calm." He pulled me close, resting his hand on my growing belly. "I hope so," he whispered. "Please stay with me." In those early days, each ultrasound was a miracle. The doctor would point out the tiny shape on the screen, the little flicker of heartbeat. And every time, Andrew would tear up, as though he couldn't believe it was happening. Slowly, news spread about my pregnancy. The same tabloids that once doubted our union now churned out headlines about the billionaire's expected heir. Everyone seemed to have an opinion. Some said, "She must be lying, she's not really pregnant." Others chose to celebrate with us. Either way, Andrew told me to ignore them. The negativity sometimes seeped into my thoughts, and I feared the stress would harm the precious life inside me. Andrew hired bodyguards to keep the paparazzi away. We stayed within the estate most of the time, focusing on our health and happiness. Despite the swirling gossip, we found pockets of peace in each other's presence. At around 4 months pregnant, I started feeling dizzy spells. The doctor said it could be normal, given my hormonal changes, but told me to be vigilant. Andrew panicked whenever he saw me sway or glance around for a seat. He insisted I stop almost all activity. He carried me upstairs, refused to let me bend to pick anything up, and made the house staff do almost everything. While I appreciated his concern, it became overwhelming. We had our first major argument one afternoon when I tried to water the flowers in the greenhouse. Andrew rushed in, scolding me for risking my balance on a short step stool. "I'm pregnant, not helpless," I cried out, tears spurting from my eyes. I hated how sensitive I felt, but hormones raged inside me. "I know you mean well, but please, let me be me." Andrew visibly struggled to remain calm. "I'm sorry," he said, burying his face in his hands. I just can't lose you. I can't lose the baby. Softer now, I walked to him and placed a hand on his shoulder. I understand your fear, but we can't live in a cage. Let's find balance. I'll promise to be careful. You promise to trust me. All right? He hesitated, then nodded. All right. Our little compromise allowed us some normalcy. I continued mild activities, and Andrew tried to relax. He often held me at night, as though making sure I didn't escape in my sleep. At 6 months, my belly was very noticeable. Andrew would touch it every chance he got, smiling like a child discovering magic. The baby kicked for the first time one warm morning. I gasped. Andrew's eyes rounded in amazement. Then he placed his hand exactly where I felt the flutter, and when the baby kicked again, he laughed through tears. He started reading children's books aloud to my stomach each evening. He told stories of how he built his company, of how we met, and how he prayed for this miracle for so long. Sometimes, I fell asleep to the sound of his voice. One night, I woke to find Andrew gone. Immediately, my heart skipped in panic, remembering the night he stormed off after a failed cycle. But then I saw a gentle glow under the door of the baby's nursery. I quietly rose and patted over, finding Andrew inside. He had set up a crib and was adjusting the mobile above it. He turned around, guilt at being caught in the act. Sorry, he whispered. I was too excited. I wanted to make sure everything was perfect. I stepped toward him, placing a hand on his arm. You don't have to be sorry. We both looked down at the crib. A mobile with stars and planets hung above. It was sweet and simple. I pictured a small baby lying there. We're going to be parents, I said softly, and Andrew nodded, eyes shining. As we entered the 8th month, the doctor advised me to stay near the hospital. We moved to a penthouse in the city, close to a reputable maternity ward. Andrew was on high alert, calling the doctor for every question. My sister came to stay with us for additional support. In the penthouse, every detail was geared toward making me comfortable. Andrew oversaw special furniture arrangements, arranged for a private chef who understood pregnancy nutrition, and kept every stressor away from me. Sometimes I teased him, saying he was treating me like a priceless artifact, but I couldn't deny the love behind his concern. Meanwhile, the press was more relentless than ever. They wanted the first photo of Andrew's pregnant wife, the first comment from us. Andrew's communications staff tried to keep them at bay. Sometimes, I feared going outside, worried they might swarm me. But then Andrew would hold my hand and lead me to a quiet place or an indoor garden, reminding me that we had our own little world safe from the cameras. We had a small baby shower in the penthouse. Only a few close friends and family attended. As I opened tiny clothes and plush toys, I felt an overwhelming rush of emotion. I never dreamt I would be here, married to Andrew, about to have a baby. Yet here I was, surrounded by love and acceptance. As we passed into the final month, something felt off. I woke one morning with a dull ache in my back. He called the doctor, who suggested it might be false labor or normal discomfort at this stage. Still, the ache did not go away. That evening, as I stood to get a glass of water, I doubled over in pain. Andrew was at my side in an instant. I could barely breathe. My sister helped me into the car, while Andrew sped to the hospital, ignoring traffic rules. We arrived at the maternity ward. Doctors rushed to check vital signs, do an ultrasound, and ask me 1,000 questions. I gripped Andrew's hand through contractions that suddenly felt way too strong and too early. The baby wasn't due for a few weeks. My heart pounded with fear, and Andrew's face was drenched in sweat as he watched me struggle. The doctors said it was premature labor. They had to see if they could delay it, We were warned the baby might be small, might face complications. Andrew looked like a statue of worry. He stroked my hair as I labored. I cried, not wanting our child to come too soon, not wanting to risk anything. After a night of medical interventions, the doctors managed to slow the process, but they said it might begin again soon. They suggested I stay in the hospital until it was safe for the baby to arrive. Andrew agreed immediately. He barely left my side. For days, I lay in the hospital bed, IV lines in my arm, monitors hooked up to my belly. Each time a contraction began, Andrew would hold my hand, coax me to breathe. My sister tried to feed me ice chips, and the nurse checked the fetal monitor. I wondered if our baby was okay, and if all our efforts would be undone at the very end. Eventually, labor could not be stopped. It came on a stormy night. The city was drenched in rain, much like the night Andrew first begged me in the hallway. The doctor told me, "It's time," with calm urgency. My heart galloped in my chest. Everything happened quickly after that. I was hooked to machines. Andrew wore scrubs, a cap over his hair. He clutched my hand so hard. Between contractions, I caught his eye. He mouthed, "I love you," though the sounds of doctors instructing and machines beeping filled my ears. I pushed through the pain, every muscle in my body trembling. Andrew whispered encouragement, tears streaming down his face. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, I heard a fragile, piercing cry. Relief washed over me so strong that I almost collapsed. The baby was here. Our baby's cries rose in the air, and the doctor congratulated us. However, the mood in the room was tense. The baby was small, and there were immediate checks to see if everything was okay. Andrew hovered near the medical staff, a look of fear and longing on his face. They cleaned and wrapped the baby carefully, placing our little miracle in my arms for just a moment. I saw a tiny face, eyes squeezed shut, screaming as if announcing, "I am here!" Andrew gently touched the baby's cheek, his hand trembling. Then, the doctors had to move our baby to a special incubator. He was born a few weeks early, and they needed to monitor his breathing. Andrew and I exchanged worried looks, but the doctor reassured us it was common for preterm babies to need a little extra help. I drifted into exhaustion, trusting the doctors would do everything possible to protect our precious child. After a few hours, I was awake enough to worry again. Andrew brought me updates from the neonatal unit. He said the baby was stable. I begged him to let me see him, so the nurse helped me into a wheelchair, and Andrew guided me down the hall. When I saw our baby in the incubator, so small, tears flooded my eyes. But a wave of fierce protective love also rose in my chest. Andrew stood behind me, gripping the handles of my chair. We watched the tiny form with wires and monitors attached. As days passed, the baby grew stronger. They told us it was good we had completed 8 months. The baby's lungs were developed enough to breathe, with only mild support. We prayed day and night at the side of that incubator. We talked to our child gently, hoping our voices would soothe him. Finally, on the day the baby could be taken out for brief skin-to-skin contact, a nurse handed him to Andrew. I will never forget Andrew's expression. He looked like he was holding a treasure beyond measure. Then the nurse helped place him in my arms. The baby opened his eyes for a moment, gazing at me, and I felt the silent promise of love pass between us. We decided to name him Adrien, in honor of Andrew's grandmother, whose name started with A. Adrien was delicate, yet each day he improved. After 2 weeks in the neonatal unit, the doctors announced that Adrien was strong enough to come home. When we arrived at the estate, staff members lined up to welcome us, clapping politely in joy. News cameras were kept far away by Andrew's security. We stepped into the grand hallway, a place once filled with the echo of Andrew's desperate plea. Now, it welcomed us as a new family. Andrew led me to the nursery, where the crib and mobile still waited. He placed Adrien in the crib gently, eyes shining with gratitude. We watched as our baby wriggled a little, yawning in his sleep. That night I barely slept, terrified that something might happen if I looked away for a second. Andrew was the same, checking on Adrien nearly every hour. But we also felt an indescribable peace. Our dream had come true. The emptiness in Andrew's life was now filled with the soft breath of our little son. Just when we thought all was well, a piece of news shattered our bubble. One of Andrew's business rivals accused him of fraudulent activity, claiming he was unfit to run his empire. Rumors surfaced that Andrew promised his entire fortune to a mistress, that I was actually part of a secret plan. The media made it sound like a huge scandal. We found out there would be an investigation into Andrew's finances. If proven guilty, he could lose everything, including the estate. Andrew told me not to panic, that he was innocent. But the stress took a toll. He snapped at employees, lost sleep, and I worried about how it might affect Adrien. One night, I overheard Andrew speaking to his lawyers on the phone. He said, "I don't care about the money. I only care about my wife and child. If they want it all, they can have it. Just make sure Amelia and Adrien are safe." Tears filled my eyes. Andrew had once proposed, "Give me a baby. I'll give you everything, even my fortune." Now it felt heartbreakingly real. He was ready to let go of the empire he had built, as long as Adrien and I were not hurt in the crossfire. The investigation began. Lawyers and accountants combed through Andrew's records. A hearing was set, and Andrew had to appear in front of a panel to defend himself. The media painted him as a fallen tycoon. Speculation soared about me. Some said I was a spy from a rival company. Some said I was the best thing that happened to Andrew. We tried to block it all out and focus on Adrien. A day before the hearing, Andrew was locked in his study with a table of thick files. I knocked softly. He looked up, eyes bloodshot. "How is Adrien?" he asked me. "Sleeping," I said. "But I'm worried about you." Andrew sighed, leaning back in his chair. "All these years of building wealth, yet it can be taken away so easily by rumors and lies. Maybe I deserve it for devoting my life to money. But He paused, tears brimming. "I can't lose you or Adrien. If the worst happens, if I lose it all, will you stay with me?" I felt a rush of love. "Of course I will stay with you. I married you because I love you, not your fortune. We will raise Adrien in a small apartment if we must." He looked at me with such relief that it broke my heart. "Thank you," he whispered. The hearing was tense. We arrived at a grand old building, with cameras flashing. Andrew's lawyers guided us through the crowd. I held Adrien, who slept peacefully in my arms. Inside, a panel of serious-faced individuals listened as Andrew's legal team presented evidence that the claims against him were false. The rival who started it all showed up with his own set of documents and witnesses. He pointed fingers, accusing Andrew of illegal deals. The atmosphere was thick with tension. At one point, I was asked to speak. My heart pounded, but I took the stand, holding Adrien close. I told them how Andrew had always been honest and generous, how I saw no sign of wrongdoing in the entire time I worked for him. I even mentioned how Andrew had changed his life's priorities for the sake of our child. Then, in a surprising twist, someone Andrew had once helped stepped forward as a key witness. It was an older gentleman, a former business partner whom Andrew had bailed out years ago. He provided crucial evidence that Andrew's rival had falsified documents to frame Andrew. The tension was high as the panel reviewed the new evidence. Andrew sat next to me, his hand gripping mine, eyes fixed on the judges. Adrien stirred, letting out a soft cry. Andrew looked down at his son, a wave of calm entering his features. After what felt like hours, the head judge cleared his throat, reading the final decision. Andrew was innocent of all accusations. The rival's claim was found to be malicious. They dismissed the entire case. Relief hit Andrew like a tidal wave. He exhaled sharply and pulled me into a tight embrace, tears in his eyes. I pressed Adrien against my chest, tears streaming down my face as well. The media cameras clicked like crazy outside, but we did not care. We had each other, and we were safe. That night, back at the estate, Andrew's staff held a small celebration. Laughter filled the halls that once echoed with sadness. Andrew made a short speech, thanking everyone for their loyalty. He also announced that he would be scaling back his business responsibilities to spend more time with his family. An uproar of applause followed. Later, Andrew and I took a quiet walk in the garden while our nanny watched Adrien. The moonlit path glimmered, the scent of roses heavy in the air. We reminisced about how this journey began, him on his knees, begging for a baby, and me so unsure of the future. I looked at him now, the man who had been so haunted by loneliness, who had offered me his entire fortune for just a chance at fatherhood. And we did it. Our little Adrien was proof that life could change in the blink of an eye, or with the steady beat of a hopeful heart. Andrew stopped walking and turned to me. "I used to think money could solve every problem," he said softly. "But with you, I learned that real happiness comes from love. You gave me love, made me see that I could be more than a lonely billionaire." He reached into his pocket and brought out a small velvet box. My heart skipped a beat. We were already married, so this could not be an engagement ring. With a playful glint, Andrew opened it. Inside was a simple gold band, with a delicate design of vines and leaves. "I know we're married," he said with a soft smile, "but I wanted to give you something to thank you for giving me the greatest gift. I want you to wear this and remember that you are, and always will be, my miracle." Tears sprang to my eyes. I let him slip the ring onto my finger. We shared a gentle kiss under the moonlight. I wrapped my arms around him, feeling his warmth, remembering how he once feared he could not have this life. We returned to the house. In the nursery, Adrien was awake, gazing at the hanging mobile. Our son grabbed Andrew's finger, eyes wide with curiosity. "That's right, Adrien," I said softly. "We're going to make sure your life is filled with love." Andrew looked at our son, then at me, a tear glistening on his cheek. "I once begged for this gift," he murmured, voice thick with emotion. "Now I have it, and no amount of money can compare." I pressed a tender kiss to Adrien's forehead. Outside, the world still talked about the billionaire's wife, the scandal, but inside this nursery, we were just a family bound by love, warmed by hope, and thankful for the miracle in our arms.